Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Nightfall Terrors. I know many of you enjoy using these videos to help you fall asleep, so before you start to drift off, it would be great if you could leave a comment sharing where you're listening from around the world. If you're enjoying the episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe as well. Now, let's get cozy, settle in, and begin. Someone keeps texting me. Hide and seek. I really wish I hadn't ignored it. The first message arrived 3 days ago while I was on a break at work. I glanced at my phone and saw a new text. Oddly, it came from an unknown source. No number, no contact name. Usually I ignore these, assuming it's just spam or some automated junk. But this message felt different. It simply read, "Hide and seek." It struck me as odd but harmless. I assumed it was a wrong number, maybe someone trying to reach a friend for a game. I replied, "You might have the wrong person. Whoever you're trying to contact isn't here." I carried on with my day. Later, when wrapping up work, I checked my phone again and saw another message. Still no number, just a blank field and, again, hide and seek. Now I was puzzled and a bit irritated. I replied, as I said, "I think you've got the wrong number. Who are you trying to reach? Who is this?" I waited briefly for a response and was about to put the phone away when a new message came in. "You hide and seek." That was enough. I'd had it with the weird texts. Since the option was still available, I blocked the contact, even without a visible number. The thread disappeared, and I felt a small sense of relief. As I got in my car to head home, another text came in. I had it read aloud using my car's text-to-speech system. It was from my roommate, Mike. He wanted me to grab more beer since he'd apparently finished what we had. I rolled my eyes. It was becoming routine. I always ended up restocking. Still, I figured I could use a drink after the strange day. I texted him back, "I'll grab some, but if you keep drinking everything, you're going to have to start paying for it." I stopped by a gas station near the apartment, picked up a case of Miller, and got back on the road. Just as I started the car again, another message buzzed in, expecting another complaint from Mike. I let the text-to-speech read it. "Seek, drink." That got my attention immediately. I called Mike on the spot. He picked up after several rings, sounding a little out of it. "Hey man, you get the beer?" "Yeah. But are you messing with me? How are you sending those texts? When I call, your number shows up, but those weird messages, it's like they're coming from nowhere. Is this some kind of joke or app?" He paused, then replied, "No idea what you're talking about. I haven't sent anything like that. Who wants to play hide and seek? Anyway, just get home. My buzz is fading." He hung up. Now I was really confused. If Mike didn't send it, who did? I arrived home a bit unsettled. Mike greeted me at the door, by which I mean he grabbed the beer and headed straight to the fridge. He popped one open and flopped back onto the couch. "Nice to see you too," I muttered under my breath. I considered bringing up the texts again, but I let it go, grabbed a drink, and headed to my room. Exhausted, I decided to turn in early. As I entered my room, my phone buzzed again. Another message, still from no number. "Almost time. Hide or seek." Now I was officially creeped out. I didn't understand how the messages kept coming through after I blocked the contact. I replied, "Whoever this is, stop texting me. I'm not interested. Leave me alone." alone, I blocked it again and turned off my phone, just to be sure. Then I tried to sleep. I dozed off briefly before a knock at my door jolted me awake. Mike's slurred voice called out, "Hey man, I don't know what's going on, but I just got a weird message. Kinda sounds like what you were saying earlier. Check it out." I rushed to the door. Mike looked dazed, staring at his phone. I grabbed it from him. The message read, "Last chance. Hide. Or seek." My stomach dropped. Panic started to rise. "When did this come in?" I asked. He shrugged. "Not sure. I wasn't really looking at my phone. What's going on?" I rushed back to my room and turned my phone back on. Sure enough, another message had come through. "Okay, you hide." Fear crept over me. I didn't know what to do, but I felt exposed, vulnerable. Calling the police crossed my mind, but what would I even say? I hadn't been threatened, technically. Just a creepy string of texts. But something felt wrong. Mike looked just as unnerved. Before I could explain, the light suddenly went out. I thought it might be a power failure, until I heard the front door creaking open. I knew I had locked it. My breath caught in my chest. Something was seriously off. I crouched down and whispered to Mike, "Hide." I crawled under my bed. Just as I reached for my phone to dial 911, it powered off on its own. It had over half a charge left. There was no reason for it to die. I shoved it in my pocket, trying not to move. I needed a light, but didn't dare search. Then came a soft shuffle, followed by heavy footsteps, much heavier than Mike's. The room's temperature dropped sharply. The air felt ice cold, and there was a foul, rotten stench hanging in it. Pressed myself against the wall beneath the bed, trying to stay still. I heard the closet door shut gently. Maybe Mike had hidden in there. But then the footsteps quickened. I realized with a chill that if I could hear the closet door, then so could whatever else was in the room. I wanted to warn Mike, to tell him to move. But fear held me silent. The heavy steps entered my room. I strained to see anything in the darkness, but I couldn't make out a thing. I just sat there, frozen and breathless, waiting. For a few moments, all was still. Then, a loud crash. The closet door splintered. Mike screamed. It was the kind of scream you never forget. Pure terror. Then, silence. No struggle. No sounds of violence. Just that scream. Cut short. And nothing else. I remained under the bed, paralyzed until the lights flickered back on. Eventually, I worked up the courage to come out and survey the room. The closet door was shattered, but there was no sign of Mike or anyone. He was gone. I called out louder as I moved through the hallway. Still, no answer. I searched the apartment. Nothing. No sign of him. Just emptiness. It's been days now, and there's still no trace of Mike. No one knows where he went. Technically, I guess he's missing now. But I know the truth, as impossible as it sounds. Something came into our apartment that night. Something not human. And it took him. He lost the game. Hide and seek. And now he's gone. Even as I write this, still trying to make sense of what happened. My phone buzzes once more. Hide and seek. I don't know who or what this is. But maybe if I respond differently, things might change. Maybe I can stop it. Or learn something. This time I reply with one word: seek. The bodies screamed when we brought them back. Every time we revived the recently deceased, they screamed. We didn't understand why. The theory behind our process was sound, and yet each attempt ended in the same way. Whenever we injected the serum into a cadaver, it would violently awaken, thrashing unless restrained, and scream until it died. Again, I worked at a research facility focused on extending life, exploring death, and experimenting with the potential to revive dead tissue. We had created a new compound that could regenerate damaged cells and seemingly restore them to full health. In our animal trials, the results were remarkable. Significantly longer lifespans, and in some cases, subjects brought back after clinical death. One rabbit, who arrived at 12 years old, lived for 10 more years under observation. With consistent success in animals, we began planning human trials. But before using the compound on living volunteers, we aimed to test it on the recently deceased. After submitting the required documentation and clearing layers of bureaucracy, we gained access to a steady supply of preserved cadavers. Each had died from known conditions and had been donated for scientific study. We prioritized those whose brains remained largely intact, bodies less than a week post-mortem. Our first trial ended in disaster. In animals, the serum typically triggered a brief spasm, followed by calm awakening, like rousing from sleep. One dog even wagged its tail at the sight of us, but our first human subject had a drastically different response. We placed the male cadaver on the table, preserving dignity with minimal covering. The injection was administered at the base of the skull, and we waited about 30 to 60 seconds for the serum to initiate cellular repair in the brain. Our theory was that the subject would return to a vegetative state, perhaps showing faint consciousness. We were wrong on both counts. The body suddenly tensed from head to toe, a ripple of movement traveling from neck to limbs, as though something intangible had re-entered it. His hands gripped the table. His head jerked, every muscle firing in violent spasms. Monitors confirmed a heartbeat. Freshly synthesized blood began circulating. He inhaled deeply. We smiled, thinking we had succeeded. Then the body lunged upright, snapping forward like a sprung mechanism. Its face twisted, jaw wide, eyes bulging, nostrils flared in shock. That's when the screaming began. It wasn't supernatural, but it felt alien in its intensity. The sound tore through his throat, shredding vocal cords and tissue, trying to expel something unbearable. It wasn't just fear. It was pain, pure and consuming. The scream echoed in the lab, vibrating through glass and cutting through us all. The body shook violently, hands raking its own skin, as if something inside was tormenting it. Its legs bucked wildly, then twisted sharply, ending in a harsh crack as the hip fractured. It toppled from the table, skull slamming against the floor, with a wet smack. The screaming continued, fainter, before ending in a final, broken gasp. Revived blood seeped from the fractured head. The leg twisted unnaturally. That sound, whatever it was, felt like something being incinerated alive or torn apart. I've never witnessed either, but I imagine this was close. I wanted to halt the program immediately, but the team pushed on. This, they claimed, was a breakthrough. We needed to understand it. For the second subject, we took extra precautions. He was restrained securely before revival began. Another male, early 40s, deceased from a heart attack. My body tensed, anticipating what we'd already seen. We administered the serum. The reaction was immediate, small twitches escalating into full body spasms. Though his movements were restricted, the noise was not, even with protective gear. Nothing could block the deep, guttural shrieks that erupted from him. The table rattled, the restraints cutting deep into his arms and legs as blood from reopened vessels seeped out. Between convulsions, his mouth snapped violently until his tongue was shredded and bleeding. He choked on his own blood. Within the first minute, we were told to intervene only if the subject could be stabilized. If not, the company would simply send more bodies and more funding. It didn't matter. Gender, race, age, physical health, or cause of death. They all returned to screaming. After enduring several weeks of these horrific trials, we began testing sedatives and alternative methods to reduce the intensity post-revival. One attempt in particular stands out. We severed the vocal cords of a subject before injection, hoping to silence what we now considered inevitable. She was a middle-aged woman, already pale from death. When revived, her eyes welled with tears, as though her mind understood something her body hadn't yet processed. Her breathing came in short, panicked bursts, desperate gulps of air like someone drowning. Though she couldn't scream, what came out was worse. Broken sobs, muffled and wet, forced their way from her ruined throat. Every noise was distorted, twisted, raw pain in audio form. Sounds of disbelief, suffering, and memory. Her eyes darted rapidly, scanning the room in horror, locking on each of us, pleading for help or release. Her limbs strained against the restraints, body trembling uncontrollably. Silent agony gripped her. Tears streamed down her face. We had silenced her voice, but not her suffering. If anything, it was more excruciating to witness. Pain without expression, torment without volume. The room filled with shallow gasps, and then something else. A low, involuntary whimper. Not from her, but from one of the assistants, curled in the corner, unable to meet her eyes. We euthanized her humanely. The effect on the team was clear. Conversations shortened. Humor vanished. Jokes once exchanged over coffee about playing God now felt grotesque. Soon, silence became routine. We only spoke when necessary, and only about the work. Each day we arrived, conducted the tests, recorded the results, and left. No one asked questions. The sense of unity we had during the animal trials slowly faded. What once felt like groundbreaking progress turned into quiet unease. People started resigning without notice. No goodbyes, just empty desks in the morning. New hires came in with eager eyes, but that optimism always faded fast. Because of strict confidentiality clauses, we couldn't reach out to those who left. I never learned what became of most of them, except for one, James. He had been a close colleague. In his last few weeks, he barely spoke or ate. Then one day, he didn't show up. Later, I saw the report. He had jumped from his apartment building. I considered leaving too, but then they offered me a raise I couldn't turn down. Despite all efforts, our results were the same. Every revived subject screamed, cried out, or thrashed violently before dying again, or being euthanized. With approval from leadership, we began exploring alternative methods. We even turned to pseudoscience and religious beliefs. Anything that might explain what science couldn't. We brought in consultants, paid extremely well and bound by total secrecy. Eventually, even threats were used to keep things quiet. One expert, a hypnotist with calm hands and tired eyes, was hired to help induce a relaxed state during reanimation. Her goal was to awaken the brain gradually, activating only certain areas while keeping others dormant. At first, it seemed like progress. We conducted multiple sessions, and on one occasion, after heavy sedation, a subject stirred gently during hypnosis. He took a slow, painful breath and whispered a single word. Why? It was quiet, barely audible, but the grief behind it was unmistakable. Then, the screaming returned, more violent than ever. The subject convulsed with such intensity that the restraints tore into his skin. The hypnotist didn't come back after that session. She didn't even collect her final payment. After that, our desperation grew. We invited a priest, an elderly man with a cautious demeanor. He agreed to help, hoping for answers. None of us were religious, but something about the screams had begun to chip away at our reason. Each reanimation seemed to strip away part of our own humanity, leaving us more detached. The priest performed a full exorcism over the body during revival. He held a crucifix over the chest and recited Latin scripture, voice trembling. At first, it seemed to work. The body tensed under the restraints, but didn't scream. For a few moments, we thought it might actually help. Then the corpse lunged upward, tearing itself from the table. Metal bolts ripped from the floor as it broke free. The priest stumbled back, narrowly avoiding injury, and managed to escape. What came next wasn't fear. It was outrage. He shouted at us, eyes wide, accusing us of going too far. "You're dragging souls from hell," he yelled. "You're calling back suffering, not salvation." His voice cracked as he ranted, echoing the same terror we'd seen in the subjects. He stormed out and never returned. From that day forward, armed security stood watch over every session. It didn't change much. The trials were nearly over, anyway. For one last attempt, hoping to find any sort of clarity, we turned away from spiritual ideas and explored more experimental technology. We selected an elderly man, late 90s, passed from natural causes. No trauma, no violent end. We surgically detached his spinal column from the brainstem, removing all motor function. The body was essentially paralyzed, unable to move or speak. We maintained only essential brain connections. Then we installed a neural interface, an experimental chip connected to the brainstem and visual cortex. It fed directly into a nearby computer and translated brain signals into text. Only a few of us remained by this point. We sat silently in the observation room, dimly lit monitors glowing beside us. Inside the subject's room, only the armed guard was present, there on permanent duty, ready to terminate the subject if needed. The serum was administered. No spasms, no screaming, just the quiet rhythm of a heartbeat starting up again, and slow, steady breathing. The silence was thick, almost haunted by the echoes of screams from previous tests. Then, words appeared on the screen. "Where am I?" We froze, even though it was just text. We could almost hear a voice behind it. An old man, confused, weary. We replied, "Who are you?" "John Forrester." "Who are you?" "We're here to help, John." "How old are you?" 96. "Who are you?" The data matched. Finally a breakthrough. Then another line appeared. "Are you him?" We hesitated. "Who?" There was a pause. Then, "You're not him." "No, no, no." John's heart rate increased. His breathing quickened. Another message flashed. "You're not supposed to know." None of us responded. My assistant looked at me, stunned, but I said nothing. "You're not supposed to know," he repeated. I looked through the glass. His eyes were wide open, glassy, wet, unblinking. Tears streamed down his face. "He won't let me back. You're not supposed to know." The cursor blinked. Then, "He won't let you." Again, "He won't let you." And again, the monitor's heart rate climbed, matching the pressure in my chest. My breathing became shallow. Then I heard something. Not imagined, not in my head. Real sound. I looked up. John's mouth was moving. That was impossible. His nerves had been severed, but his lips parted wider, and sound came out, faint but audible. "He won't let you." I froze. I should not have been able to hear it through the glass, but I did. The guard looked to me, waiting for a signal to terminate. I hesitated. "He won't let you." The whisper grew louder, strained, forced from a throat that should have been incapable. "He won't let you. He won't let you. He won't let you. He won't let you." The gunshot ended it. Final, immediate. The echo of the shot hung in the air like a judge's gavel. John's body went limp. His eyes stayed wide, his face frozen in a look of anguish. The guard, pale and silent, holstered his weapon and walked out. The silence afterward was overwhelming. I sank into my chair, ears ringing, not from the blast, but from the absence of everything else. No machines, no voices, just silence. I didn't know how to explain what happened. I still don't. The project was shut down shortly after. Officially, it was declared a dead end. We were well compensated. Bonuses, severance, and layers of legal agreements to ensure we never spoke about it. But the money doesn't fix the silence. I'm alone now, typing this, surrounded by quiet so heavy, it feels like it has weight. It's constant. And to fill that space, my mind replays John's voice, the words he repeated. And honestly, I wish the screaming would come back. I picked up a man on a remote road inside a tunnel that seemed endless. What he told me in there still sends a chill through me. I spend a lot of time on the road for work, often driving late into the night. Most trips are uneventful, just me, the road, and whatever podcast I'm listening to. But one night, I was rerouted off the main highway due to an accident and ended up on a lesser-used state route that wound through isolated, hilly terrain. It was well past midnight, probably around 2 a.m., the kind of darkness where the trees lining the road seem like silent figures, and your headlights are the only proof the world hasn't disappeared. A mile or so before reaching it, I saw a sign warning of a tunnel ahead. No name, just a standard caution. Tunnels at night are always a bit unsettling. This one looked particularly old. A plain archway carved into a rocky hillside, likely decades old. The interior was lit by spaced-out, dull yellow lights overhead, casting flickering shadows that moved as I drove. It was longer than I expected, disappearing into the darkness of the hill. As I entered, I eased off the gas. The sound of my tires shifted as they hit concrete. The air turned cooler and damp. My radio, which had been playing soft indie music, suddenly crackled before dissolving into static. Typical for tunnels, though still annoying. I turned it off, leaving only the hum of the engine and the regular thump of passing lights overhead. I was maybe a quarter of the way through. Hard to tell in tunnels, when I noticed him. A man standing on the narrow walkway along the right-hand side. His back was mostly turned to me, facing the tunnel wall. My heart jumped. You don't expect to see someone on foot in a tunnel at that hour. I figured maybe his car had broken down. I gently slowed the car. As I neared him, he turned, and I saw his face under the weak tunnel lights. He looked to be in his late 50s or early 60s, worn out, slightly unkempt, dressed in a basic jacket and jeans. He wasn't waving or asking for help, just standing there. But when my headlights illuminated him, he lifted a hand, not waving, just a slow, tentative motion. Every instinct said to keep driving. A lone man in a remote tunnel at 2 a.m. It doesn't bode well. But he looked more lost than dangerous. And a part of me, maybe out of empathy, maybe guilt, nudged me to stop. I rolled to a halt beside him and lowered the passenger window. The damp air drifted in, carrying the scent of wet stone and exhaust. You okay? I asked, trying to keep things calm. He leaned down, peering in. His face was weathered, his eyes tired. Thank you, he said, his voice rough. My car died a bit before the tunnel. It just cut out on me. In the tunnel? I asked, checking my mirror. I hadn't passed any vehicles, no hazards, nothing unusual. He shook his head. No, just before it. It drifted into a ditch. One moment everything was fine. The next, the engine and lights cut out. I had to wrestle the wheel to avoid hitting the rock wall. It's probably hidden down in the gully, not visible from the road. He motioned vaguely behind him toward the tunnel entrance. I figured I'd walk through. There's a 24-hour station about 2 miles past the tunnel exit. Saw it on a sign before things went bad. It sounded reasonable. A vehicle slipping into a ditch in the dark wouldn't be easy to spot, especially if it lost all power. He didn't come across as threatening, just unlucky. Hop in, I said, unlocking the door. I'll get you to the station. Oh, bless you, he replied, visibly relieved. You've no idea how much I appreciate it. He climbed in, bringing with him that damp tunnel smell. And something else. A faint, metallic scent, like copper. Subtle, but odd. I figured it was from the ditch or maybe his car. No trouble, I said as we pulled away from the curb. Rough place to end up stranded. Tell me about it, he said, rubbing his hands as if cold, though it wasn't particularly chilly. Everything just stopped. I'm lucky you came through. We drove in silence for a while. The overhead lights continued flashing past. I glanced at the dashboard, nothing out of the ordinary, but I kept expecting the tunnel to end. I thought I saw a brighter glow ahead, maybe the exit, but it didn't seem to be getting any closer. I'd been going about 40 mph, the posted limit, and by now we should have emerged. This tunnel's a bit longer than I thought, I commented, mostly to break the silence. It is, he agreed softly, staring ahead. Stretches on for quite a while. Minutes passed, I began to feel uneasy. That faint glow ahead stayed distant, never growing larger. I checked the odometer. We'd been inside for nearly 3 miles. That couldn't be right. Not for a tunnel in such a remote area. A structure like that would be well known, even notable. Something was off. My gut tightened. I glanced at the GPS, frozen on the point where I'd entered. The little icon hadn't moved. The screen was unresponsive. GPS is out, I muttered. They don't work well deep underground, he said. Calm. Too calm. Looked over. He was still facing forward, unreadable in the flickering light. That coppery scent seemed stronger, or maybe I was just focusing on it more now. Feels like we're not getting any closer, I said, more tense than before. Look, it's barely changed. Finally, he turned to look at me. His eyes, darker than before in the dim light, had a strange stillness to them. Patience, he said in a low tone. Tunnels can be tricky. We'll be out soon. Very soon. His words were meant to reassure, but they had the opposite effect. There was a slight shift in his voice, something subtly off. Not threatening, exactly, but not right either. Then I noticed something else. Out of habit, I glanced at the rearview mirror. The tunnel lights behind us, the ones we'd already passed, were behaving strangely. One, about 100 yards back, flickered and went dark. A moment later, the next one followed. Then, the next. A wave of dread swept over me. The tunnel was going dark behind us, one light at a time, as if the darkness itself was moving forward, chasing us, swallowing everything in its path. Did you see that? I asked quietly. The lights, they're going out behind us. The man didn't turn around. His gaze stayed fixed on me. Darkness comes for all of us eventually, he said. There was no mistaking the odd tone this time. His voice had taken on a deeper, more resonant quality, filled with unsettling certainty. My pulse was racing. This wasn't just a breakdown. This wasn't just an unusually long tunnel. Something was wrong, very wrong. The atmosphere inside the car grew dense and suffocating. That metallic, coppery scent had intensified, and I was beginning to feel sick. I pressed harder on the gas. The engine protested as we accelerated. 50, 55, 60 miles per hour. The tunnel walls blurred past, concrete streaking in my peripheral vision. The overhead lights flickered by faster, but the distant point of light I assumed was the exit stayed, just as far away. What's happening? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Why hasn't the tunnel ended? He was quiet at first. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, Maybe it doesn't want us to leave. I glanced into the rearview mirror. The dark was closer, much closer. The last working light behind us was maybe 50 feet away, and everything before that had vanished, swallowed by a black void that felt alive. It pulsed as if it were breathing. Panic was rising in my chest. I felt an urgent, animal need to escape. You should slow down, the man said, his voice now oddly firm, but still calm. There's no need to rush. No need to rush, I nearly shouted. That darkness is closing in. We have to get out. There's nothing to fear, he said, his head tilting just slightly. It brings peace, no more struggle. He paused, then continued, his voice now soft and coaxing. You should stop the car. Just pull over. Let it come. It's easier if you stop resisting. As he spoke, A strange fatigue came over me. My eyelids grew heavy. My hands felt weak, the steering wheel suddenly hard to hold. Stopping didn't sound so bad. In fact, the idea was comforting. The fear was fading, replaced by a creeping calm. Peace. Yes, peace. My foot eased off the gas. The car slowed. In the rearview mirror, the darkness loomed closer, almost inviting now. But then, something deep within me pushed back, a surge of raw instinct. Danger. Don't give in. It hit like a splash of freezing water. My eyes snapped open, and adrenaline surged through me, chasing away the fog. This wasn't peace. This was erasure. I slammed the brake pedal. The tires screeched, the car skidding slightly, before coming to a violent stop. The man jerked forward against his seatbelt, grunting. Behind us, the shadow was just yards away, a thick, writhing mass of blackness pressing closer. My hand went to the glove compartment. I keep a licensed firearm there for safety during long drives in unfamiliar areas. My fingers found the grip and pulled it free. "What are you doing?" the man asked. His voice had lost its calm tone. Now it was cold, sharp, something entirely different. I raised the gun, hand trembling but steady enough. The safety clicked off. I pointed it at him. "Out," I said, voice rough with panic. "Get out of my car, now." For a moment, he just stared. First at me, then at the gun. Under the flickering tunnel lights, his expression changed. The tired lines of his face contorted. His eyes, they weren't human anymore. They were pitch black, bottomless, and his smile, too wide, too unnatural, spread slowly across his face. That metallic smell now filled the air, strong and suffocating, like old blood. "You can't escape," he said, voice low and rasping, like something dragging across a stone. "It's tasted you. It knows you now." "Out," I screamed, finger tight on the trigger. His smile widened unnaturally. Then, with eerie calm, he opened the door and stepped out. He didn't seem concerned about the gun at all. "Very well," he said, his voice quiet. He stood there for a second, framed by the open door, the darkness curling behind him like a living thing. "This tunnel might let you go today," he said, staring straight at me. "But every shadow, every tunnel, you'll find it again. It remembers you." Then he turned and walked toward the blackness. One step, two, and on the third, he simply vanished, like smoke into wind. One moment there, the next gone, absorbed. I didn't hesitate. I threw the car into gear and slammed the accelerator. The wheels spun for a split second before gripping the slick concrete. The car lurched forward, surging down the tunnel. I didn't dare look behind me. My focus locked on the far-off light, hoping it wasn't just a trick. The engine roared. The lights above blurred into a dizzying strobe. Had no idea how fast I was going. I only knew I had to keep moving. The darkness. I could feel it behind me, still closing in. Then, finally, the pinpoint of light ahead began to grow. Quickly, it expanded into the familiar shape of an arched tunnel exit, with the dim light of early dawn shining beyond. I burst out of the tunnel like something being expelled. Cool, fresh air hit my face. I gasped, shaken, barely able to breathe. But I didn't stop. I kept going, needing as much distance as possible between me and that place. I drove for maybe 15 minutes. It felt much longer before I spotted the glow of a 24-hour gas station. I veered off the road, tires screeching as I came to a halt, threw the car into park. I stumbled out, legs barely supporting me, soaked in sweat and trembling. Inside, the attendant, just a sleepy teenager, stared at me. I probably looked like I'd been through a nightmare. I grabbed a bottle of water, hands so unsteady I could hardly open it. I said nothing. What could I even say? I went back to the car, locked the doors, and sat there until sunrise, my gun resting on the seat next to me. I never found the man's car. No wreck, no ditch, no sign he'd ever been there. Just an empty stretch of road. It's been a few days now. I still can't drive through a tunnel, not even in daylight. The moment I approach one, a cold sense of dread hits me. His words still echo in my mind. It knows your scent. It will find you again. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know what the darkness really is. But I'm sure of one thing. It wasn't over. It still isn't. I found a ship in an abandoned Cold War facility. Something still lives inside. Urban exploration has always been one of the most exciting parts of my life. There's something about stepping into an old, forgotten building, seeing spaces others left behind, touching what remains of a distant past. That thrill always gave me a rush. It felt like a reward after a long work week. But this last place, I wish I'd never gone. My name is Arthur. A friend reached out to me about a location no one's ever managed to film. It was a rundown facility tucked away on the remote and rocky coast of Scotland. He knew I'd jump at the chance. I've always dreamed of exploring a Cold War relic hidden in the middle of nowhere. It's been a goal since childhood. So, I went for it, packed my camera, and set off on the nearly 12-hour drive from London. I won't name the location, not because I forgot, but because I don't want anyone else finding it. That place should stay buried, exactly as it was meant to. I wish I hadn't been so curious. Even now, part of me wants to return. But I won't. I can't. Getting there wasn't easy. Steep cliffs, heavy winds, and the constant roar of crashing waves. Along the way, I noticed faded signs warning of private property, which only made me more intrigued. Apparently, the land belonged to a group called the Office of Marine Integrity, a so-called NGO that claimed to protect marine life and coastal areas. After reaching the coordinates and searching for any entrance without success, it looked like nothing but bare, rocky land. I accidentally stumbled on something metal hidden among the stones. Looking closer, I saw it. A steel hatch, partially covered in moss and barely cracked open. Strange. Not what you'd expect from a conservation group. The hatch was rusted but not locked. A faint serial number barely visible on its surface. That alone should have warned me. Still, I pushed it open. It led to a decaying, dark elevator shaft. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but curiosity took over. This isn't what I expected, I muttered, while fumbling to get my camera working. Carefully climbed down, mindful of the elevator's age. Probably built sometime in the 1950s or 60s. I took a breath, maybe said a quick prayer, I'm not sure, then pressed the down button. The elevator groaned to life, its lights flickering. Can't believe this thing still runs, I said to the camera, already imagining my friends' reactions once they saw the footage. The elevator halted. The doors opened slowly. Ahead lay a dark corridor, water pooled up to my ankles. The air smelled of mold, sea salt, and rot, so strong it almost made me gag. My breathing echoed in the still air, a small comfort in an otherwise silent space. I reached for my flashlight, careful not to step on anything hidden below the surface. Once the beam lit up the corridor, I realized something wasn't right. This wasn't an NGO site. This was something else entirely. The worn-out signs were too serious. The faded logo had a military feel to it. As I scanned the walls, the truth hit me. "Welcome to Facility ESC-02," read the lettering on the wall. Broken security cameras hung lifelessly overhead. I continued on, stepping through the stagnant water. A reception desk lay ahead, littered with water-damaged documents, some floating, some stuck to surfaces. The deeper I went, the more uneasy I felt. This wasn't just an old base. It was concealed, forgotten, and waiting. I tucked the flashlight between my teeth and picked up a half-dissolved sheet of paper. Subject: Vessel Dweller Response Protocol. Undertow local names. The white border. I had no clue what it meant, but a chill ran through me. I felt like I had gone too far already. The words repeated in my mind as the paper trembled in my hand. It had to be some elaborate prank. It couldn't mean what I thought. Could it? Most of the text was unreadable, but the feeling in my gut didn't go away. I scanned the area, anxiety growing. Something felt off, like I wasn't alone. "Just nerves," I said aloud, trying to stay calm. But the rising hair on my arms and tight feeling in my chest said otherwise. I felt something or someone watching. But there was no sound, just me, the water, and silence. Still, I moved forward. That's why I came, to document this place. I couldn't leave without anything to show. I kept the flashlight aimed low. Every step sent ripples across the surface. I couldn't see how far the facility extended, but it was larger than expected, big enough for at least a small team. Past a break room, its furniture soaked and falling apart, I reached a sloping hallway. At the end, double doors, one bent, almost falling off. From the dark space beyond came a faint, wet, rhythmic sound. Could have been footsteps, but as soon as I listened, they stopped. Probably my nerves again, I told myself, and pushed forward, now watching through my camera. It helped to feel like an observer. The room beyond was colder than anywhere else I'd been. A dry dock, or what used to be one, now half flooded. Emergency lights dimly lit the space. In the middle, half submerged, lay an old fishing vessel. Its hull damaged, paint peeling, tilted to one side. Dead cameras pointed at it. Nearby, a small control room sat close to the dock. Inside were files, reports, and a computer terminal. This wasn't just observation. It was containment. Before heading to the boat, I checked the room and picked up another document. My hands trembled with both fear and something close to fascination. Incident report. Subject Vessel Dweller. 1979. Most of the writing had blurred into gray smudges, but I caught a few lines. Vessel operator, Daniel Fraser, mass approaching from beneath, climbed on board, white, tall, not human, still believed to inhabit the vessel. I froze. Was it still there? I slowly turned to face the wreck. It loomed quietly in the dark, and something inside me screamed to run. So I did. I sprinted from the control room, leaving everything, papers, my camera, behind. I heard something shift in the water, not loud, just a faint ripple, enough to make me stop. Even though I should have kept going, I looked back. That's when I saw it. Near the edge of the dock, beside the boat, stood something tall and pale, motionless, watching. Its white eyes cut through the gloom, and I didn't dare point my light at it. I couldn't see its feet, submerged or just not there. Its shape was unnatural, long, boneless, white like snow. Its skin rippled faintly, as if distorted by water. It didn't flinch. It just stared. It belonged in that place. I didn't. Stumbled backward, slipping on the wet floor, catching myself on a rusted cabinet. Still, it didn't move. It only watched, had tilted. Only when I reached the hallway's edge, hand brushing the wall, did it shift. I looked away for just a second, and it stepped forward. No splash, just movement, a shift in space. Then I heard a groan from the boat, as if something massive stirred after a long rest. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a ruin. It was a home. I had trespassed. I ran, panicked. I knew it could be faster than me in the water, but I didn't look back. I retraced my steps, focused entirely on the elevator. No noise chased me, just silence, which somehow made it worse. I reached the elevator. Water still dripped from above, but something else moved in the distance. I hit the call button. The doors were slow, agonizingly so. I turned around, unable to help myself. It stood at the far end of the hallway, not attacking, just watching. It wasn't hunting, it was guarding. I was the intruder. The elevator finally opened. I stepped in, eyes locked on the figure. It didn't follow. It could have, but it didn't. The ride up felt longer than the trip down. I may have been holding my breath the whole way. My eyes stung, either from fear or the fact I hadn't blinked. I tried to make sense of it. Why was it down there? Why keep it hidden? What was this facility, really? The Office of Marine Integrity? Not likely. The elevator stopped. I climbed out, crawled through the hatch, and collapsed on the wet grass, facing the cliffs. Nothing followed, no noise, just the wind and sea, and the awful realization that something still lived down there. I never should have disturbed it. It let me leave. And as I lay there, soaked and shaking, one question burned into my mind. Why? Don't follow the moaning. Back when I lived in the neighboring town, I used to walk through yellow maple wood nearly every weekend. It wasn't until I moved away and looked back on all those visits that something struck me. I had never seen any wildlife there. No deer, no squirrels. Not even the sound of bird song comes to mind. The place felt strangely empty, but I suppose it's easy to overlook what isn't there. Although the woods lacked animals, they were hardly abandoned. In fact, plenty of people walked those trails just like I did. I often passed smiling strangers on the narrow paths that wound through the thick trees. Oddly enough, it was there that I first met Mary, my girlfriend. That early spring afternoon marked the beginning of our relationship, which grew just as the forest did. We especially loved exploring in the fall, as daylight faded and the cold crept in. The trees turned a bright, glowing gold, lighting the woods from within. walking hand in hand beneath the drifting leaves, felt close to perfect, like peace made real. One brisk afternoon, while walking in a less familiar part of the woods, Mary spotted something unusual. A message had been carved into the bark of a tree, jagged letters barely visible. Don't follow the moaning. Beware of he who lurks. We thought it was eerie and wanted to show our friends, but we never managed to find that same tree again. The whole thing was a little unnerving, but it also seemed like a harmless tale to share. Then, a few weeks later, we heard it ourselves. A low, strange moaning, inconsistent but clearly present. That ended up being our last walk there. I remember how my skin prickled and how stunned Mary looked. We have to find out what it is, she insisted, even as I hesitated. Like fools, we followed the sound, moving deeper into the brush. It was hard to trace, but slowly the moaning grew louder. Eventually, we came to a clearing I didn't recognize and stopped at its edge. In front of us were two enormous feet, so big they made ours look like toy blocks. They were pointed in our direction, and whatever they belonged to stood well above the tallest trees. I looked up through the thinning canopy and barely made out the shape of what resembled a massive, hairless human figure, standing completely exposed in the open space. It hadn't noticed us. Its tiny, unfocused eyes stared into the distance. Long, thin arms hung at its sides, hands brushing through the tall grass. My heart pounded, and Mary gripped my hand tightly. The moaning was unbearable, high-pitched, disgusting, filled with squelching, smacking, and a horrible crunching. I squinted and I saw its jaw moving oddly from side to side. A pair of human legs, bare, lifeless, protruded from its mouth. They glistened with thick saliva, drops collecting and falling slowly from the toes, except Mary's hand wasn't gripping mine. That's just the version I wish were true, because she hadn't stopped walking when I did, because she hadn't seen it until she'd already stepped cheerfully into the clearing, calling back to me with a playful challenge. I can still see the look in that creature's eyes when it finally noticed her standing there. That same shocked expression frozen on her face. And I doubt I'll ever forget its wide, unnatural grin as it bent down to pluck her from the field, nor the sound of her red legs kicking weakly as she vanished, and the moaning. It still echoes. There's something in the Appalachians. They say the Appalachian Mountains are older than trees, that the rock forming them has existed for over 500 million years. In all that time, something unnatural may have developed there, something designed by nature to be the perfect predator. At least, that's my theory. No official investigation was ever conducted. I won't name the company. I signed 6 separate NDAs. What I can say is that despite having top-tier technology and being relatively new, the company I worked for during the incident has erased nearly every trace of its original identity. I'm sure if I dug deep enough, I could find remnants, but from what I've seen, it now operates under a completely different name. That alone makes me wonder what they might still be uncovering. I started there in 2022. I had just completed my master's degree in robotics from Northeastern University. My recruitment wasn't anything special. My thesis happened to align perfectly with one of their current projects, thermal insulation strategies for sustained robotic functionality in sub-zero environments. Yeah, I made it sound as complicated as possible, but it landed me the job. A week after defending my thesis, I received an email with an offer. The interview process was straightforward. Normal discussions, no red flags. I was hired to develop insulation systems for walking robots. Think Boston Dynamics style machines. I was thrilled to find a role in my field so quickly, and I barely noticed the detail that the job site was in a remote area of the Smoky Mountains. I accepted right away. When they said remote, they meant completely cut off. There were no roads to the facility, only a helipad for access. Occasionally, I saw snowmobiles on patrol. I didn't question it. Given the advanced nature of our work, most of us assumed it was related to military research. So we stayed focused and didn't ask unnecessary questions. My team's core mission was keeping our robots running in deep winter. No freezing joints, no cold-related malfunctions. We'd made real progress. One night, we had a major breakthrough in battery efficiency. It was a big moment, and we celebrated the only way young, awkward engineers knew how, by drinking far too much. That's when everything changed. I'll share everything I remember. That night I was with 3 close colleagues. Let's call them Elliot, Josh, and Hassan. We'd only known each other for about 6 weeks, but working together so closely it made us fast friends. Elliot and Josh were drinking heavily. Eventually, they dared each other to step outside shirtless for 5 minutes. Going out at night was strictly prohibited. There were minimal lights, extreme cold, and a very real risk of slipping off a narrow catwalk and falling off a ridge, or worse, triggering an avalanche. Management had made it clear, no nighttime outdoor activity. If it had to happen, we were required to take a headlamp and a walkie-talkie. That's how Elliot and Josh convinced us to go along with the dare. I knew I couldn't stop them, but I made sure they at least took the required safety gear. They agreed, laughing, and stripped down right away. I unlocked the utility room and handed out walkies and headlamps. We tuned our radios to a private channel so security wouldn't pick up our chatter, and headed out. Hassan and I planned to wait just outside and watch while the others tried to outlast the cold. Everyone agreed. We opened the door. The cold hit like needles on my face. The wind was vicious, biting through anything exposed. Still, Elliot and Josh were laughing, calling each other names as they went farther down the catwalk. Hassan and I laughed too. It felt ridiculous and harmless. But within a minute, everything shifted. I saw Josh step off the catwalk, disappearing into the shadows. His headlamp was still visible, bobbing deeper into the snow. I turned to check on Elliot, and he was gone. Just darkness where he had been. I immediately radioed them. Elliot, Josh, you guys all right? Silence. It dragged on painfully. Josh's headlamp kept moving, farther and more erratic. Hassan and I looked at each other and took off running into the dark, calling their names. But the wind stole our voices. We reached where they had vanished. No trace of Elliot. The only sign of Josh was his path in the snow, and his light, still flickering and distant. I radioed again. Josh, Elliot, stop messing around. Let's go back in now. Still nothing. Hassan looked terrified. We both knew something was deeply wrong. I tried to keep him calm and told him firmly, get inside, get the CSO. Say Josh wandered off drunk. I'll look for Elliot. I shoved him toward the door, and he ran. I watched him disappear inside. Then I was alone. The next 5 minutes were the worst of my life. I turned toward the nearest building, North Ridge. It was meant to house seasonal staff, and at the time, it was supposed to be empty. I hoped I'd find Elliot sheltering inside. I stepped toward it and swiped in with my badge. The door slammed shut behind me. I flipped the lights, but the power in this building was weak, barely enough to illuminate the corridor. Everything looked gray, industrial, eerie. I radioed again. Pick up. I moved through room after room, calling the same phrase every 10 seconds. Pick up. Nothing. Pick up. Still. Nothing. Until finally, static crackled from the walkie. Then, a human voice, soft and deliberate. Shh. I froze. I'll never forget that sound. Only the four of us had walkies, and only on that channel. Elliot and Josh liked it. Jokes, sure, but never something like this. I stood still, overwhelmed by fear. Nearly crying, I spoke again into the walkie. Pick up. A pause. Then, from inside the building, I heard it again. Shh. I snapped my head toward the sound. Through a doorway, partially hidden behind a table, I saw Elliot. He wasn't hurt, but looked frozen, catatonic. I stepped forward, and everything fell apart at once. Elliot let out a low, guttural scream, not of pain, but of despair. At the same moment, a hand reached toward him from across the room. I swear, the distance it crossed was impossible. Time slowed. The hand touched his face and changed him. This is the part I still can't make sense of. I saw his features collapse inward, like fabric folding. Eyes, nose, mouth, gone. Then, somehow, they returned. I screamed. Not just in fear, something primal came out of me as I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't even think about helping him. That shame still follows me. I sprinted out of North Ridge onto the catwalk. To my shock, about 10 armed soldiers were already approaching, weapons raised. 2 grabbed me while the rest charged into the building. I listened for gunfire. None came. They said they never found Elliot. They told me Josh's frozen body was discovered far down the slope. His headlamp still glowed. His walkie was gone. I was questioned in detail. Strangely, no one doubted my story. When I described the whisper, the reach, Elliot's face, they just wrote it all down. No police were involved. They just handed me an NDA to shield the company from any connection. That raised even more questions. Why no investigation? How did 10 soldiers show up within minutes at a supposedly isolated research site? What was the true function of North Ridge? And how did my badge even give me access? There's more I wish I could say. Things that might connect the dots. But I'm bound by legal agreements, and honestly, I'd rather forget most of it. I still work in robotics, based in the Northeast now, but I will never go near those mountains again, and I strongly suggest you don't either. I thought it was just sleep paralysis. My name's Charlie, and a few months ago, I moved into a quiet, peaceful apartment complex. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, and the building had a calm atmosphere. Around the same time, I was laid off, which forced me to cut back on expenses and simplify my routine. I didn't go out often, mostly avoiding anything costly. I'd occasionally visit a friend, and of course, I had started a new job working at a decent-sized warehouse operating a forklift. One evening after my shift, I returned home to find my elderly neighbor struggling with her door. She looked up as I approached. "Oh, honey, would you mind helping me with my groceries?" she asked kindly. "Sure, Mrs. Margie," I replied. "Let me just drop off a few things first." "Thank you, sweetheart. I really appreciate it," she said, smiling warmly. After helping her bring up the bags, she looked at me and asked, "So, when did you get a new roommate?" I paused, confused. "New roommate?" She nodded casually. "When I was heading to the elevator earlier, I thought I saw someone going into your apartment." I frowned. "I don't have a roommate, Mrs. Margie. Are you certain someone went inside?" She hesitated. "Well, now I'm not so sure. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Maybe I was mistaken." "I hope so," I said, trying to shake off the unease. She smiled again and said, "Well, have a nice rest of your day," before closing her door. Still unsettled, I unlocked my apartment expecting to find a mess. Or worse, someone inside. I searched every corner, closet, and space under the bed. But everything was untouched. Nothing was missing, and there were no signs of forced entry. Eventually, I chalked it up to a mix-up. Maybe Margie just saw something and misunderstood, but something about it wouldn't leave me alone. After that day, I began to feel like I was being watched, not always, but especially when I was alone at home. Whether in the kitchen, the bathroom, the living room, or my bedroom, I had a sense of being observed. Oddly, the feeling vanished whenever I left the apartment, for work, errands, or social visits. But at night, it got worse. I often saw vague shapes in the darkest corners of my bedroom. These sightings started happening more frequently. I bought a bedside lamp, kept a flashlight nearby, and even purchased a 38 special, just in case my worries turned out to be real. But every time I shined light into that corner, there was nothing. Over and over, the result was the same. No one there. I started to question my own mental state. I shared what was happening with a friend, and she suggested it might be sleep paralysis. But that didn't quite add up. I was always awake and could move, even if I was scared. Hoping I wasn't the only one experiencing this, I asked my neighbor, Paul, in the elevator one day, "Hey, have you felt like someone's watching you lately?" Paul was somewhat of a recluse, quiet, thin, a bit disheveled. He didn't talk much and nobody really knew what he did. He always looked exhausted and smelled like he avoided showers for days. No," he said with a nervous laugh. "Why? Do you feel like you are?" "Kind of," I admitted. "Ever since Mrs. Margie said she saw someone going into my place a few weeks ago, I haven't felt right." He chuckled. "Sounds like paranoia, man. I wouldn't put too much faith in Margie's eyesight. I doubt anyone's sneaking around your apartment." Just then, the elevator reached our floor. He stepped out, and I followed. "Hope you're right," I said, unlocking my door. "My brain's been a mess lately." "Join the club," he replied, heading into his own apartment. As the weeks passed, things escalated. I began to catch glimpses of a figure dressed in black, always in my peripheral vision. Each time I turned, it vanished without a trace. One evening, I came home to find my front door unlocked. My stomach dropped. I grabbed my 38 and swept the apartment. Room by room, I checked. Again, nothing. In a way, it was scarier finding nothing than it would have been to find someone there. After calming down, I knocked on Paul's door. He opened it slowly. "Yeah. Did you see anyone near my door today?" I asked. He sighed. This again? No, haven't noticed anything. He must have seen I wasn't satisfied, because then he said, why not ask Margie? Maybe she saw something. I nodded and went downstairs. After a short wait, Margie opened the door with her usual gentle smile. Hey, sweetheart. Everything okay? Hi, Mrs. Margie. I just wanted to check if you noticed anyone near my door earlier. Her expression shifted. Oh, no. I didn't see anyone. You're sure? I pressed, hoping to jog her memory. No, I'm sorry, she said, slowly closing the door. Didn't see anything. Her tone unsettled me. She'd never acted that way before. Back inside, I dropped onto the couch, covering my face with my hands. What is happening to me? I repeated. Then came a loud knock. Startled, I opened the door to find the complex's security guard, Mike. Hey, Mike, what's going on? He looked past me into the apartment. Heard you've got a secret admirer. I raised an eyebrow. A secret admirer? Yeah. Polly mentioned you've been acting a little off. Said you think someone's watching you. Well, Mrs. Margie did say she saw someone enter my place. I guess I've just been a little paranoid, I admitted. I'll keep an eye out, he said, reaching to shake my hand. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. You got it. He nodded, then turned to leave. Exhausted, I collapsed into bed without eating. That night I woke up to the sound of my door opening. A wave of terror washed over me, and I couldn't move. I heard slow footsteps approaching, the blanket at my feet lifted, and a cold, smooth hand, like leather, touched my skin. Inside I was screaming, but my body wouldn't respond. The hand moved slowly along my legs. Then another hand began to stroke my arm. One rose to my cheek. I could feel its breath on my face. Hot, ragged. I didn't dare open my eyes. Somehow, I knew that's what it wanted. Then cold lips pressed against my forehead. The hands withdrew. I heard footsteps head back toward the door. The handle turned and the door shut. I cautiously peeked through my lashes. It hadn't left. It stood by the door, tall, lean, skin dark and slick in the moonlight. Its back to me, but its head turned, watching. It didn't look human. It looked alien. Eventually, it left my room and closed the door behind it. I stayed frozen until daylight. Once I could move, I grabbed my gun and searched the entire apartment. Again, nothing. Finally accepting I might be suffering from sleep paralysis, I made an appointment with a psychiatrist. Strangely, in the days leading up to it, things returned to normal. No strange sightings, no eerie feelings. Life felt stable. At the appointment, I spoke with the psychiatrist for 2 hours. She confirmed it sounded like sleep paralysis and prescribed something to help, along with some techniques to manage episodes. When I got back, I saw a moving van outside the building. Upstairs, I found Paul carrying boxes. You moving out? I asked, surprised. Yeah, got a new job at a tech firm a few states away. Already secured a place. Congrats, that's great news. Thanks. Hey, mind helping with the last 2 boxes? Sure thing, I said, grabbing them and following him into the elevator. He placed his boxes down and looked at me. So, did you ever shake off the paranoia? I think so, I said. Feels like it's finally over. Knew you'd come around. Just a matter of time, he said with a smirk, grabbing the boxes again. The elevator reached the lobby. and we loaded the boxes into the van. He reached out to shake my hand. His hand was cold, strangely familiar. "Take care, Charlie," he said. "You too, Paul." After he drove off, I headed back to my apartment to rest. As I walked in, I noticed an envelope on my kitchen table, labeled, "To Charlie." I opened it. My stomach sank. It read, "Dear Charlie, I've really enjoyed being your neighbor, but these past few months, they've meant everything to me, especially the other night in your bedroom. P.S. Your skin is really soft. Haha. Take care. Love, Paul." I broke into the wrong house. Now, people are disappearing. The house stood alone on the edge of town, its windows glowing gold beneath a porch light that always looked too perfect. It belonged to the Hawthorns, a family so influential. People named buildings after them. Wealthy, respected. I even used to be friends with one of their kids back in grade school. But my life took a different path. And although I'd never broken into a house I'd once been welcomed into, times in Renville were hard. I needed a bigger payout, something to finally get me out of this town. And honestly, it's not entirely on me. The Hawthorns played a big part in Renville's collapse. They had shares in every business that ever opened here, from tech startups to green energy, even a syrup plant. They were internationally known until their high-profile divorce and the sudden disappearance of Mrs. Hawthorne. Most assumed Mr. Hawthorne was responsible, but she was only one of 17 people to vanish that month, and 16 of them had no connection to him. Eventually, he packed up, took the kids, and left town. The businesses followed. What little economy remained shriveled and died. These days, the most stable job is at the dollar store. It's a great spot for weekend hunting retreats. But for those of us who live here, we drive 45 minutes to stock shelves at Walmart. So, yeah, I don't have much sympathy for the Hawthorns. The upside, they rarely return. Maybe a few days every couple of months. And only Mr. Hawthorne. The house is guarded by 2 security guys, which used to be a concern. But they're more bark than bite, lounging around with sidearms, pretending to be alert. I mean, who's bold enough to rob a mansion with the security cars parked out front? But if you observe the place for half a year, patterns emerge. 7 out of 8 cameras have red lights. 3 are blocked by ivy or cobwebs. The same porch bulb's been flickering since February. The back patio, just a basic pin tumbler lock. Child's play. What really caught my attention were the basement windows. On the east side, 2 small, narrow windows sat just above ground. Not only were they locked, they were nailed shut, with thick black iron spikes driven into the brick, and in 6 months, that room behind them only lit up twice, both times when Mr. Hawthorne was in town. Whatever's in there is the only thing important enough to drag him back here. 2 weeks ago, no lights, no guards on duty, and no Hawthorns. I made my move. I circled through the woods, reached a small cut I'd made in the fence months earlier, camouflaged behind overgrown brush. The grass was damp, the air still. I crept along the perimeter toward the blind spot under the one inactive camera, just in case it had any juice left. A few steps to the side, and I ducked under the patio. In the shadows, I planted my Wi-Fi jammer, turned it on, tuned the frequency. It wouldn't disrupt the front cameras, but it'd scramble the feeds connected to the 3 back exits. My planned escape routes if things went south. I bypassed the garage door in favor of the sliding glass patio door. Both led to stairwells, but the patio route cut through the kitchen and living room, away from the bedrooms. If the guards were up, they'd likely be passed out on couches. The house was pitch black. No movement in the living room through the windows. Best to avoid the bedroom stairs entirely. The lock gave easily, maybe 30 seconds. I eased the door, shut behind me, and relocked it. The kitchen smelled like dust and old coffee. I moved slowly, carefully, toes landing first to muffle each step. Every floorboard creaked like a warning. I passed the spotless counters and marble island into the dining room. A long table, high-backed chairs, untouched. And then I noticed a small door tucked between two built-in cabinets. I opened it. The air from below was cold and dry, with a faint metallic tang. I stepped in and closed the door behind me. The stairs creaked louder than expected. I paused, counted to 20. Nothing. Then I descended. The basement was sterile. Not musty, but cleaned with something strong, like bleach. Still, it looked like I remembered it from childhood birthday parties. Two big rectangular rooms formed an L shape. To the left, a hallway led to another staircase and a bathroom. The door I wanted, the one to the room with the sealed windows, sat in the middle of the wall that ran alongside that hall, about 25 feet away. Close enough to the stairs. Close enough to leave the way I came in. Unfortunately, it was in full view of anyone coming down the other staircase. If someone showed up, my only shot was to dive behind a leather recliner in the far corner, partially hidden by fake plants and a side table. I memorized the route, then crept toward the heavy oak door. The lock was stubborn. It took 45 seconds before the pins clicked. Bingo, I whispered. I pushed the door open slowly, maybe too far. That might have been my mistake. A smarter thief wouldn't have hesitated. Since that night, I haven't opened a door fully, not even halfway. I doubt I ever will again. As it reached a right angle, I heard it. A soft scrape, something gritty beneath the door, like sand or salt. Then, footsteps, bare feet, first slapping tile, then softening on carpet. From the second staircase, someone was coming. I shut the door gently, ran to the recliner and ducked behind it, crouching low behind the fake plants and table. I held my breath. A bulky man switched on the stairwell light. He muttered over his shoulder, talking to someone else, presumably the second guard. Probably nothing. Dust sets this thing off all the time. Just check the kitchen. Laser sensors. Seriously, I didn't get it yet. But I would. Soon, the man shuffled down the hallway. No lights flipped on except at the stairwell, casting a long shadow across the room, just feet from me. He was barefoot, wearing pajama pants. Only his sidearm marked him as security. He curled his toes in the carpet, then crouched, inspecting something. A speck. A grain. The barrier, he said, barely audible. My stomach dropped. He was catching on, realizing something had tampered with that line of whatever it was. Salt, sand, rice. He stood, pressed his ear to the door, one hand on the knob. The other unclipped his holster. I cursed myself. I hadn't locked the door. I didn't have time. But it didn't matter. He'd know. He'd open it and crash. The oak door shattered inward. Wood splinters flew. 2 arms shot through, unnaturally long, gray with decay, slick with rot. Their fingers twisted like broken branches, tipped with yellowed, blood-crusted nails. The guard didn't even scream. The hands grabbed his waist. Not his chest, not his legs. His waist, like they meant to fold him in half. And they did. The snap echoed like a gunshot. His spine bent backwards unnaturally. His eyes locked with mine, wide, terrified, bleeding. The creature dragged him through the hole, crushing his body against jagged wood. His limbs flailed as if trying to catch up. Then, silence. The door creaked open, and it came out, lurching, tall, hunched. Its limbs weren't alien, just horribly disproportionate. Its spine pushed against the skin, like trying to break free. Its hair hung in oily mats, the kind that looked like they'd peel off in one piece. Then I saw the face, or what was left of it. The jaw dangled loose, filled with teeth. Human, animal, crooked. But the worst part wasn't the teeth. It was the bracelet, delicate silver links, an amber stone, and the ring, massive, unforgettable, the kind I hadn't seen since I was 8. Mrs. Hawthorne. She scanned the room, nearly locked eyes with me. Her pupils were wide, black, swallowing the whites. She moved toward my hiding spot, slow, deliberate, like she could sense me, smell me, maybe even the urine running down my leg. Then, a shout from the stairs. The second guard. Her head snapped toward the sound in a glitchy, twitching motion. He bolted. I heard him tossing chairs behind him to slow her down. She moved. She launched up the stairs, slamming into walls as she ran. No, sprinted faster than anything should. Then, the sounds. Splintering, screams, glass, flesh, and finally, the alarm. I waited a full minute. I wasn't going to die just to avoid police questioning. When I moved, I pulled my hoodie tight and sprinted out the front door. No way I was risking the woods, not with her still out there. 4 minutes later, lungs burning, I heard sirens. I dove into a ditch as cruisers sped past. By the time I reached my car behind the old bottling plant, I saw even more units arriving, including some from the next town. The house burned down by the end of the week. I don't know what the police discovered, but they're not telling the public everything. 2 girls went missing that Thursday, last seen at the elementary school playground. On Saturday, a car turned up near Observatory Park. Blood on the dash, signs of a struggle. Some locals still haven't been officially reported missing, but their families are posting nonstop, hoping for updates. During a search party, one of the sheriffs never returned, and just in the past week, 11 pets have vanished. Dogs, cats, even a parrot. I want out. Every instinct tells me to leave, but there's a stay-at-home order in effect. Now, I'm stuck here. What the hell am I supposed to do? No one goes near the glacier lake on 8/8. Something waits beneath. The glacier lake lay silent, its dark waters undisturbed, and the pine-lined shores were deserted, despite it being peak season. It was August 8th. I remember the date clearly because it marked an anniversary I had dreaded for the entire year. This was why I found myself in the remote wilderness, climbing a 5,000-foot mountain with nothing but a camping permit for one night tucked into my hastily packed rucksack. My sore legs and aching back felt like a small price to pay for reaching a place where cell service couldn't follow. I knew that dozens of messages from family and acquaintances were probably coming in, but I didn't want to hear them. I didn't need more condolences. I didn't need more reminders that he was gone. What I needed was fresh air, to dive into cold water that would make me gasp and force my heart to start beating again. I needed to feel alive. I set down my rucksack and looked across the wide, still lake, which should have been bustling with outdoor enthusiasts, hikers, and influencers. In summer, this lake was everywhere online, topping lists and search engines. But today, on August 8th, it was just me, and the lake was mine. That should have been a warning, but all I saw was a rare moment of solitude, peace. The distant calls of ravens echoed off the granite cliffs that surrounded the lake. I responded with a throaty "crow," the first sound I'd made all week. I walked out to the dock, took off my clothes, and dove into the water. The cold hit me like a shock, stealing my breath as I broke the surface, gasping for air, every inch of my skin tingling. It felt incredible. I flipped over and floated, weightless, suspended in the moment, trying to forget everything, especially the date, August 8th. Floating there, with the water cradling my body and the silence surrounding me, a thought hit me hard. August 8th, 2 infinity symbols standing upright. Daniel and me, forever. And now, nothing. How cruel that he died on this day. I tilted my head back, letting the water fill my ears, muffling the bird calls and the intrusive thoughts. At first, all I could hear was white noise and the steady pulse of my heartbeat. Then, out of nowhere, a guttural scream broke through, its source impossible to determine, but close enough that I could hear sharp pops and hisses, like a voice trying to break through a wall of bubbles. In an instant, I was upright, treading water, scanning the shoreline. No one else was there, just me. The silence returned, but it was different now, alive in a way that made me uneasy. I felt an undeniable pull to dive deeper, to hear that scream again. I plunged into the cold, dark water, following the haunting, warbling sound, half like a whale song, but filled with terror and anger. I stopped swimming and exhaled, floating under the surface, completely still. Then, a second scream, identical to the first, erupted from the depths, sending vibrations through my chest, like the lake itself was trying to reveal something buried. Did I want to uncover it? For a long moment, I couldn't decide. Swim, a voice said in my head. It was Daniel's. Fast, the water around me began to vibrate, a rhythmic pulsing as if something enormous was moving toward me from below. 2 shapes rose from the depths, identical, eerily human, their movements synchronized and predatory, their screams, now louder, dragged at the water, pulling me toward the abyss. I screamed, my voice merging with theirs as I kicked and swam. But I had lost my sense of direction. Cold fingers tightened around my ankles and arms, pulling me down, trying to tear me apart. I fought back, thrashing in the water. But whatever was dragging me deeper wasn't letting go. Bubbles exploded around me as I struggled, fighting for air. No, I shouted one last time, a burst of desperation flooding through me. In that instant, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing the lake in bright light, and the water cleared. I was alone. The cold grip was gone. No predators were pulling me under. I broke the surface, gasping for breath, and immediately started swimming, desperate to leave the lake behind. Crawling up the pebbled shore, I felt the weight of the water, trying to drag me back, but as soon as I was on land, a sense of relief washed over me. Before I could catch my breath, I saw two cairns. Small stone piles, gray and black, weathered by time, but unyielding. I forced myself to stand, my feet bleeding and unsteady as I approached. My heart dropped when I saw the dates carved into the stones. Two identical dates. And at 8, suddenly a voice called behind me. It was a park ranger, his tone harsh. "What are you doing here? Don't you know what day it is?" I whispered. "The anniversary." The ranger eyed the water, then me, his expression wary. "You have a death wish. 8-8, stay away from the lake. Everyone knows." "Well, now I know," I replied, my voice shaking. He sighed deeply, lowering his binoculars, then turned his attention to the lake. "They were twin sisters," he said quietly. 6 years ago, a storm hit, and a flash flood took one. The other drowned trying to find her. I felt my knees weaken, a wave of sorrow and familiarity sweeping over me. It was too similar to my own grief. Daniel had vanished, and I felt like I was drowning in my search for him. "The lake belongs to them on 8-8, the ranger continued, his gaze locked on me. "Everyone knows that." I blinked, still processing. "As soon as the sun rises on 8-8, the land goes quiet," he explained. "Not peaceful, heavy. The trees stop moving. The air feels thick. It's wrong, every part of it. It warns you to stay away." I didn't know. I whispered, my voice faltering. "But every year someone comes," the ranger said, his eyes flicking to my bare legs. "Something in the grief of this place calls to them. It pulls them in." I looked down, my blood running cold. There, against the goosebumps on my skin, were deep, bruise-like fingerprints. Then I heard a laugh, a nervous, shaky sound that came from me. The fear and relief were colliding inside me, and all I could think was, I didn't let the grief pull me under. The ranger glanced at me again. "Not many can say they survived 8-8. I turned away from the lake, gathered my clothes, and hoisted my rucksack onto my back. With a lightness I hadn't felt all day, I sprinted down the mountain, never once looking back. The cottage that follows me. Growing up, my dad often spoke about his family's cottage, an old lakeside retreat in Ontario that my grandfather had built when my dad was a child. It was a place where they spent every summer, and the stories of playful dogs and teenage adventures on the water filled our dinner table. But because my dad had moved to British Columbia after marrying my mom, I only had one visit to the cottage when I was a kid. I was 10, and that trip left me with some lasting memories. It was my first time flying across the country, and for all the years I had heard about this place, it was finally real to me. The cottage itself, though, wasn't quite as magical as the stories. It was small, with 3 cramped bedrooms at the back and one larger room at the front, which housed the kitchen, dining table, and a little seating area. My dad and I would end the day playing cribbage on an old, worn-out board that was kept on a shelf full of games and books. The walls were adorned with a map of the area, and the sitting area featured a terrifying shag carpet. The kitchen had linoleum floors, but the dining table was a special piece, handcrafted by my grandfather from a tree that had fallen on the property. The cottage had a gently sloped roof and a small stilted porch designed to level it with the land as the shore sloped down to the lake. It was completely wood-paneled with an electrical box on the back wall and a faint burnt silhouette of another from when lightning had struck the cottage back when my dad was a teenager. That trip remains the only time I met my grandfather, and there were so many people around that it didn't leave much room for one-on-one moments. It was a family reunion, and with my dad's siblings, their spouses and cousins, most of us had to stay at nearby homes. The one moment I had alone with my grandfather was when we played tic-tac-toe on a cheap aluminum set he had found behind a bookshelf. He beat me 3 times in a row. Not that surprising, as I was only 10 at the time. Just like my dad, my grandfather wasn't shy about winning, though I had a feeling he wouldn't have handled losing very well. I didn't find out on that trip. What makes that visit stand out so clearly in my memory is what happened the day we were leaving. I was walking up from the lake when I saw someone, tall and unfamiliar, walking casually around the back of the house toward the front door. Strangers at the cottage weren't unusual. It was a regular occurrence for neighbors to stop by, and with so many relatives around, it could have easily been another distant relative coming by. But 2 things stood out. First, the figure moved strangely, almost springy, leaning back like someone walking backward, yet moving forward. Second, the figure appeared oddly shadowed, as if seen through a haze despite the bright daylight and no shade in sight. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but I followed the figure into the cottage, only to find that when I went inside, the place was empty. I checked every room, looked in the closets, under the table, and even the sink. There was no one there. No stranger. No one at all. It's one of those things that could easily be chalked up to a child's overactive imagination. But as I look back, I'm no longer so sure. I think now, it might not have been a person at all who wandered around the back of the cottage and disappeared inside. It's important to remember that this cottage was far from where I lived, in Ontario, built decades before I was born, by a grandfather I met only once. My grandfather passed away when I was 14. It was a sad time, but most of the sadness was for my dad, whose relationship with him had been complicated. They never had the chance to resolve their issues, and neither was particularly good at expressing emotions. We flew back for the funeral, but we didn't visit the cottage again. It passed to my uncle, Paul, my dad's older brother, and I assumed I would never see it again. But I was wrong. That summer I was invited to a friend's family cabin on the Sunshine Coast. It was a coastal cabin, not a lakeside one, and I was excited about spending the week swimming, playing, and talking about girls. Just the perfect way to spend a couple of weeks as a teenager. When we arrived, we pulled around to the back of the cabin, a wood-paneled, one-level building. I was focused on helping out, so I grabbed the heavy cooler from the car and took it around the front, up the steps, and into the door. When I walked inside, I was shocked. The cabin looked exactly like my grandfather's cottage. It had the same long table at the front, made from a single tree trunk, the same awful shag carpet, 3 bedrooms at the back, a linoleum kitchen, and a map on the wall. My friend's family came in after me, and this is how the conversation went. "Hey, are you okay?" asked my friend's mom, noticing that I had dropped the cooler. "Yeah," I said. "This place looks exactly like my dad's family cottage in Ontario." "Oh, that's funny," she replied. "It was probably built around the same time as this one. My dad built it when I was little. He wasn't much of an architect, but He just wanted everyone to have a place to sleep and eat. We added the porch when I was about your age. It was nice to have somewhere to have coffee in the morning. Yeah, I guess my grandpa did something similar, I said, convincing myself that it was probably just a coincidence. Another example of how cottages by the water had a similar design. My friend's mom helped me put the cooler in the fridge to keep it from falling again. We finished unloading the car, and when I went back out to grab my bag from the trunk, that's when I saw it. On the back of the cabin, there was a scorched outline of an electrical box, right next to the working one. When I asked my friend about it, he shrugged and said it was from a fire they had once had near the back of the cabin. But when I pointed out how it looked like an electrical box, he just said, "Oh yeah, weird." At that point, I should have left, but I didn't. Being 14 and not wanting to dwell on anything that wasn't about hanging out and talking about high school, I didn't think much about the strange similarities between the two places. After all, I had only been 10 when I saw my dad's cottage. On my last night at my friend's cabin, I noticed something on the map on the wall. It wasn't a coastal map of British Columbia. It was a map of Lake Country, Ontario. By then, everyone else had gone to bed and I had stayed up reading, enjoying some quiet time after a week of sharing space with another family. When I realized the map was from Ontario, I felt a chill down my spine. I went to the kitchen sink to brush my teeth, my nerves on edge. The cabin had no real bathroom, just an outhouse, and I quickly changed in the front room to avoid disturbing my friend. Just as I was about to try to fall asleep, I heard something. It was the sound of an aluminum tic-tac-toe set being tinkered with. I turned around, and to my shock, my grandfather was sitting at the long table, pulling the pieces from the board. He looked up at me and gave a slight scowl. "Come on, kid. We said we'd play. Let's play." He returned his focus to sorting the pieces. I don't believe in ghosts, not in the traditional sense anyway. But if they do exist, I think they're deeply personal. Something immeasurable and beyond comprehension. At that moment, I considered 3 possible explanations. One was that I had simply fallen asleep while reading and was dreaming. The second was that I might be hallucinating, experiencing some kind of break from reality. And the third possibility, an unsettling one, was that this was truly a visit from my late grandfather, his spirit lingering in some form. I wasn't sure which of these was true, but in the moment, I decided that if it was truly my grandfather, I'd spend some time with him while I could. I sat down at the table to play tic-tac-toe. Between the ages of 10 and 14, I briefly became interested in game theory and strategy, especially in solved games. I learned how to always win, or at least never lose, at tic-tac-toe. We began playing in silence, and since it was a children's game, the first round ended quickly with me winning. My grandpa frowned, squinting at the board. "Finally getting it, huh?" "Good," he said, though his expression didn't match his words. In the next game, he went first, and we ended up with a draw. "It's cold here, eh?" my grandpa remarked as we reset the board. "Wasn't expecting it to be so cold." "I guess," I answered. "It wasn't that cold, just a bit nippy." Then I asked the question that had been on my mind since I sat down. "How are you here, Grandpa?" He smiled, slightly, pressing his lips together. "I'll need a scotch before I can answer that properly," he said, motioning for me to go first. "Did you come here just to play tic-tac-toe with me? Do you want to tell me something or ask me to do something?" I probed. He huffed, Can't a man just play a game with his grandson? He glanced up at me briefly before looking back down at the board. Is that so strange? He placed his piece. It felt strange, I thought to myself, especially if he was dead. But the power of family and ancestry seems to extend beyond death, so I didn't say it aloud. I placed my next piece, and my grandpa grew still. I think he realized he was about to lose again. Let me win, he said softly, looking down at the board. His voice had turned cold. What? Why? I asked, perhaps more sharply than I intended. It seemed odd to let him win, especially since, when I was younger, he never allowed me that privilege. Please, he repeated, his voice almost pleading. Suddenly, something fell from his mouth onto the board. His tooth. He looked up at me. Please let me win. I can't stay here. But before I could fully process his words, another tooth fell out. Then another, and another, as if being pushed by teeth from behind. They clattered noisily onto the aluminum board, faster than his mouth could shed them. His mouth filled with teeth, falling one after another. Please, he cried, his voice muffled by the clatter of teeth. He stood up, reaching out to grab my shoulders. Before he could touch me, I heard a voice behind me. I spun around, desperate for help. There stood my friend, looking confused but unfazed by the tooth-filled man behind me. When I looked back, my grandpa was gone, along with the teeth and the tic-tac-toe board. It was just a quiet, empty cabin with a view of the water. Apparently I had been shouting, waking my friend up. I apologized, promising to explain in the morning. He must have sensed my distress, as he didn't push me for details. We climbed into the bunk beds, and though I was relieved to be sharing a room with someone, sleep didn't come easy. The next day, I told him everything. The similarities with the cottage, the strange figure, and my grandpa's desperate plea. When I finished, he held up his arm. Look at that, he said, pointing to the goosebumps. You've got me all freaked out. Why didn't you tell that one around the fire last night? It's a great ghost story. I'm stealing it. I told him I wasn't joking, that it wasn't just a ghost story. He just laughed and said, I believe you, man. That's what makes it so spooky. He added that next time we visited, he'd draw a salt ring around the cottage. But that never happened. Life took a different turn for me when I returned home. That weekend, my Uncle Paul passed away unexpectedly. He had been in and out of sickness throughout his life, and years of immunosuppressants had worn on his heart. His death hit my dad hard, compounded by the fact that Uncle Paul had left a lot of his estate to him, including the cottage. My dad became overwhelmed, juggling work with the funeral, the will, and family matters. Paul had been a fun uncle, but also had some odd financial habits that my dad was now trying to fix, often angrily asking what kind of an idiot would do that on purpose. Then, after the outburst, there would be a period of silence where he tried to hold back tears. My dad never dealt well with emotions. The summer I turned 16, my family flew to Ontario. It was our first time there since the funeral. We visited relatives, toured childhood homes, went to a Blue Jays game, and of course, made a stop at the cottage. I had mentioned my unsettling experience at the cottage to my dad when the trip was first planned. He then told a story about his own ghostly encounter with a former Boy Scout leader from college, which led to a story about trying magic mushrooms, which he quickly stopped telling before getting to the part about Uncle Paul's stoner phase. As We neared the cottage. I brought it up again, but my dad didn't respond. My brother called me a coward and plucked an arm hair. We rounded the final bend, and the sight of the cottage hit me hard. The back of it was scorched, the same unmistakable marker I remembered. To me, it felt like the cottage was waiting for something, full of a strange, unwelcome energy. But to my dad, it felt empty, devoid of life. We stopped the car, and no one moved. Then, my dad began to cry. I could see him grieving the loss of a place that once meant so much, full of family, youth, and memories. Now just an empty shell. My mom placed her hand on his arm until his sobs subsided. Without a word, we turned the car around and headed back. I felt a mix of relief and guilt for not being able to make the place feel alive again for my dad. After that, life returned to normal for a while. I finished high school, went to university, met a girl, and did all the things you're supposed to do. The strange events from my past faded into the background. Then, my dad got sick. It started as skin cancer, a type that's usually treatable, but it spread quickly, appearing in multiple spots on his body. Despite treatments, the cancer spread into his lymph nodes, beyond the point of being operable. Over the course of a year and a half, I watched my dad deteriorate, his body slowly consumed by the cancer, and the treatments trying to fight it. It was a painful, slow process. By the end, he was a shell of the man he had once been, skeletal, with a locked jaw, and barely recognizable. After his death, the grief was overwhelming, a turbulent mix of emotions that didn't settle until my girlfriend invited me to her family's ski cabin for a weekend. I needed a break, a couple of days to escape from everything. Her family had been renovating the cabin, the chateau, for years, and it was finally ready for us to see. On the drive up, I was genuinely happy, listening to music, taking in the snowy scenery. But when we pulled into the cul-de-sac, I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. The chateau was unmistakably my dad's old cottage. The wood-paneled walls, the peaked roof, the stilted front porch, all the same. My girlfriend rushed ahead, excited to see the inside, while I stood frozen, staring at the place that held so many memories. I didn't know why I went inside. Maybe it was curiosity, but I think something else inside me was driving me there. Something I might never fully understand. Inside, there was only one person. It was my dad, or rather, a version of him. Emaciated, sick, still holding the cribbage board I remembered from his childhood cottage. He began to set it up on the kitchen table. "Come on, kiddo," he said, his voice strained, speaking through clenched teeth. "Let's see if I can skunk you." It was like nothing had changed, but everything had. He was trying to be lighthearted, but I could see the cancer had consumed him. We played in silence, the sound of cards and pegs filling the room. I had been playing for a while when I looked up. His tumors had grown horrifically, bursting through his skin. Blood dripped from his face, but his eyes, those hollow, dead eyes, were clear. He looked at me and spoke one word: "Run." I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the door, not daring to look back. I heard grotesque, wet sounds behind me as I ran. The door slammed open, and as I tore down the driveway, I felt a strange sense of urgency. I started the car and drove away, my heart pounding. 20 minutes later, my girlfriend called. I felt relief wash over me when I heard her voice. and I made up a lie about a family emergency. I knew I couldn't ask her what she'd seen in the chateau. I couldn't explain what had happened. Later, I returned to my childhood home, the place where everything used to feel safe and familiar. But as I turned onto the block, I saw something that made my heart stop. It wasn't my home. It was my dad's old cottage. Then, my dad began to cry. I could see him grieving the loss of a place that once meant so much, full of family, youth, and memories. Now just an empty shell. My mom placed her hand on his arm until his sobs subsided. Without a word, we turned the car around and headed back. I felt a mix of relief and guilt for not being able to make the place feel alive again for my dad. After that, life returned to normal for a while. I finished high school, went to university, met a girl, and did all the things you're supposed to do. The strange events from my past faded into the background. Then, my dad got sick. It started as skin cancer, a type that's usually treatable, but it spread quickly, appearing in multiple spots on his body. Despite treatments, the cancer spread into his lymph nodes, beyond the point of being operable. Over the course of a year and a half, I watched my dad deteriorate, his body slowly consumed by the cancer and the treatments trying to fight it. It was a painful, slow process. By the end, he was a shell of the man he had once been, skeletal with a locked jaw and barely recognizable. After his death, the grief was overwhelming, a turbulent mix of emotions that didn't settle until my girlfriend invited me to her family's ski cabin for a weekend. I needed a break, a couple of days to escape from everything. Her family had been renovating the cabin, the chateau, for years, and it was finally ready for us to see. On the drive up, I was genuinely happy, listening to music, taking in the snowy scenery. But when we pulled into the cul-de-sac, I felt a cold wave of dread wash over me. The chateau was unmistakably my dad's old cottage. The wood-paneled walls, the peaked roof, the stilted front porch, all the same. My girlfriend rushed ahead, excited to see the inside, while I stood frozen, staring at the place that held so many memories. I didn't know why I went inside. Maybe it was curiosity, but I think something else inside me was driving me there. Something I might never fully understand. Inside, there was only one person. It was my dad, or rather, a version of him. Emaciated, sick, still holding the cribbage board I remembered from his childhood cottage. He began to set it up on the kitchen table. "Come on, kiddo," he said, his voice strained, speaking through clenched teeth. "Let's see if I can skunk you." It was like nothing had changed, but everything had. He was trying to be lighthearted, but I could see the cancer had consumed him. We played in silence, the sound of cards and pegs filling the room. I had been playing for a while when I looked up. His tumors had grown horrifically, bursting through his skin. Blood dripped from his face, but his eyes, those hollow, dead eyes, were clear. He looked at me and spoke one word: "Run." I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the door, not daring to look back. I heard grotesque, wet sounds behind me as I ran. The door slammed open, and as I tore down the driveway, I felt a strange sense of urgency. I started the car and drove away, my heart pounding. 20 minutes later, my girlfriend called. I felt relief wash over me when I heard her voice, and I made up a lie about a family emergency. I knew I couldn't ask her what she'd seen in the chateau. I couldn't explain what had happened. Later, I returned to my childhood home, the place where everything used to feel safe and familiar. But as I turned onto the block, I saw something that made my heart stop. It wasn't my home. It was my dad's old cottage.